Hey, Katie, thanks so much for being on the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, the way I divide this podcast is I have three segments. So, the first segment is more a bit into your personality. So, that's rapid fire set of questions. So, let's start off with what is the hardest part of your job?
I would say maybe learning to not take things so personally. Um, we are working with the same group of people for years at a time on different sides of different issues. You win some, you lose some. Learning just to go with the flow and um, not take things too personally.
Nice. What skills should a lobbyist possess?
Um, we should definitely be adaptive. We're working with, like I said, a lot of different folks. New people come in every year. Um, being responsive, things move very quickly. Um, being reliable. The best thing we have is our reputation. I would say those are a good top three.
Nice. What is something very few people know about you?
Um, Well, I own a mobile bar, and when I'm not in Raleigh lobbying, sometimes you can find me bartending at weddings on the Outer Banks is kind of a fun weekend gig.
Sweet. So a mobile bar is something like it's like you can just invite for parties and then you just show up there. Is that what it is?
Yeah, yeah, it's called Camp Cocktail. It's a 69 Shasta camper that was converted into a bar. And during the pandemic, a friend and I, got kind of bored. A girl was selling this bar, and it's just a lot of fun to hang out with people on the best day of their lives, serve them some drinks, and a good excuse to spend some time out on the beach.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Do you have any role models in your life?
Oh, I've got tons. Um, there's the big ones that I'm sure we can all gravitate towards. Um, a big one for me, Elizabeth Beiser. She was as a mentor. She's currently the secretary at the Department of Environmental Quality. Um, Bill Ross uh, was also a secretary um, of back when it was DNR, Department of Natural Environmental Resources. Those are some personal ones. My mom, my sister.
Nice. What is the best advice you've ever gotten?
Hmm. A great one that I get from Bill that I just mentioned often is cheer up, damn it. And that kind of goes back to not taking things too personally. Whenever I kind of get down or uh, get a little too stressed out about something we're working on, he'll tell me to cheer up. And I think that that's always important to remember.
What is the one thing you want your family to remember about you?
That I was reliable. Um, and I was there for them. I'm very connected to my family. My little sister lives up in Brooklyn, so I don't see her as often as I'd like, but um, I see my parents most weeks. And so just try to be there for them.
Why is it important for the youths to be in government relations?
Oh, that's incredibly important and a great question. So I've always been involved in politics since I was maybe in high school. I think that politics is the most accessible way to impact what's going on in your daily life as well as what's going on in the world. Um, the youth will be the next generation in charge. I still feel like as a millennial, we're just kind of getting to that point of having a large influence. Um, and I just think impacting the world around you is one of the most important things you can do.
So, how would you educate the youth that being a part of government relations and the government processes is important to them?
So two things that I would focus on is to not get too bogged down with hot controversial topics. We can all focus kind of what's going on at the federal level, and that's what you see in the news. But I think, what's going on at the state level is just as important and just as impactful. So that's one thing I'd say, focus on your state and your local governments and how you can help there. The other thing I'd say is, learn how to engage in political discourse in an effective and civil way. I know that that's a big thing out with social media these days is a lot of people don't speak to each other, or maybe don't speak to each other as kindly as they should. And so I think having empathy, try to meet people where they are and see where they're coming from. I think that's really important.
So here's a fun question for you. Let's say you had all the money in the world. What would you do with it?
It's so funny that you would ask that. And maybe this is an embarrassing thing to say on a podcast, but just the other day I was having this conversation with some friends. And obviously, maybe buy out my mortgage, my parents' mortgage, take care of some less than fun things. Maybe buy my cat one of those really fancy litter boxes. I think they're like $600 where they clean themselves. And I don't know, just travel. I think if I won the lottery and never had to work again, I would continue to do what I do today, and advocate for a lot of my clients because they're things that I'm passionate about. But just travel more.
Nice answer. So let's jump into the second segment where we go into your past. Tell us, where did it all begin? Where did it all start in terms of your childhood? When you said you were interested in politics, how did that start?
So I'm from the Outer Banks, Eastern North Carolina. So I've always had a deep connection with nature, wanting to be outside. And just in high school, I had a really impactful current events teacher, Mr. Phoebus, and then another really impactful oceanography teacher randomly, Mr. Williams. And they were not incredibly politically involved, but you wouldn't expect an oceanography teacher to be teaching you about the political process, but he did. He taught me about critical thinking. And I think just from having sort of those experiences, realizing, I would start volunteering on campaigns and realizing even at like 15, 16, I could have some sort of impact. I don't know, just really inspired me. And I think that's kind of where it all began.
And after high school, I see that did you jump into political science and government at the Meredith College, or was it the environmental stuff you were interested in?
So it was actually it was political science first. I knew I wanted to do political science. I thought I wanted to go to law school, and then I realized that being an attorney, I work for attorneys, so they are great people. I love them, but I don't think that I could sit at a desk all day in an office. Our jobs as lobbyists are so social, and I always, even after school, I thought I would go to law school and then become a lobbyist, and then found out that you don't really have to. So I'm just out here with that one. But yes, I knew that I wanted to do politics, and Meredith had actually just started their environmental sustainability program. And that was kind of my second interest. And so I double majored.
I see. So were there any specific courses you were interested in when you took those political science, major? Was there anything which you were specifically interested in there?
Yeah, definitely. So I really found a love for philosophy and theory. And so I took as many classes on that subject as I could different environmental theory classes, political theory classes, philosophy classes, religion classes. That sort of just the thought of thought was very interesting to me.
Okay. And if someone who's taking the political science degree, would you recommend that they should try their hand at government relations right after they graduate?
Well, yes, if they have the opportunity. So I was very fortunate in that a few months after graduating, I was contacted by a local state legislator from my hometown about managing his campaign. And that kind of, we might get into this a little bit later, but that kind of sparked the journey that I'm on now. I worked for him on his second campaign. His name is Paul Tyne, legislator from the Outer Banks. And I worked for him as his campaign manager and then his legislative assistant, and he just decided not to run again, and that's when I came to Brooks Pierce. So I had that opportunity and I'm grateful for it, and I wouldn't give that up if I could go back. The only caveat I would have is that just turned 30, and I think I already mentioned, if I were to win the lottery, I would love to spend more time traveling. And so I think that if I were to talk to someone who was just out of college, I might recommend they take a little time off to travel the world and then get into government relations.
Okay. And how did you get that position as a campaign manager?
So I had actually just reached out to some folks around the Outer Banks that I had volunteered with before on campaigns in the past. And my plan was to stay in Raleigh, but I had reached out just saying, I'm happy to do some volunteer work this cycle, especially digitally. I'm one of the younger folks involved out here. So stuff on social media, was offering to help out with things like that. And they said, oh, well, Paul is actually looking for a campaign manager. It was June on the Outer Banks, and the sun, June was a difficult time to find housing, and my parents have a house here. So he jokingly said that was the best thing I had going for me.
So would you say that starting out as a campaign manager defined who you are today?
No, I don't think so at all. I think working on campaigns is important work. And I think starting on campaigns is an avenue into the world of government relations. There's a lot of people that kind of go back and forth. A lot of skills that I learned while campaigning are important in my work and my clients' work, and in some other personal endeavors like financing, learning how to fundraise. But I wouldn't say that it necessarily defines who I am today. I only worked in campaigns for one cycle professionally. I had volunteered before, like I said. But I think there's a lot of lobbyists who have heavy history in campaigning. So I don't feel like I can claim myself as one of those. But I also grew up working in the service industry, waiting tables. I even do some bartending now, like I mentioned. And I think that sort of customer service aspect helped me a lot, both in the campaign world and also as a lobbyist now. Just knowing how to talk to people, like I said, I think I probably could throw empathy in there as my fourth of what's important to be an effective lobbyist.
No, very cool. That's a very fine point you raise, that, being in the service industry definitely helps, I guess, right? To maintain the government, relationships with people and how to talk to them.
Mhm.
And after your stint as a campaign manager, I see that you moved on to being as a legislative assistant at the NCGA. Tell us, how did you get that, and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, so I was Paul Tynes' legislative assistant, so the same legislator that I had managed his campaign. And his current legislative assistant had been moving on to another opportunity. And so after he won, he brought me back to Raleigh to work in his office. And that was a great experience. It gave me a good relationship with a lot of legislators who are still there today. It gave me a lot of organizational skills. That was the first time that I had run an office. I had worked in an office a few times in college, but working on a campaign, it's kind of boots on the ground, in the nitty gritty of it, working out of your car most of the time. Working in as a legislative assistant gave me a lot of professionalism, I think, in that organizational office space. It also made me really have a great appreciation for legislative assistants. Whenever I talk to up and coming lobbyists, I always recommend, you don't need to just have good relationships with legislators, you need to have good relationships with their staff. Legislative assistants are kind of the gatekeepers to that office. So if you get on their bad side, your best bet is to catch someone in the elevator. So I loved being a legislative assistant. I was on the 5th floor in a great little corner, and we just had a great time and made a lot of great relationships that still help me today.
Very cool. And how would you say, when you meet someone at the legislative assistant or someone there, how do you strengthen your network, right? How do you make sure that you want to maintain a relationship and get better at it? How would you suggest someone do that?
Well, I always say that the first conversation you should have with someone should not be to ask them something. So whether it's a legislative assistant or a new member or someone within the administration, I think you should try to create that relationship before you need the relationship. So if you walk by an office and the door's open and you see someone you've never seen before, maybe just pop your head in and introduce yourself, ask them where they're from. Try to establish a relationship that's not just work-based.
Nice.
Ask them if they have grandkids or, whatever their demographic is, what movies they like.
Cool. Good answer. So let's move on to the next set. So after you were the legislative assistant, you moved on to be the government relations advisor at Brooks Pierce. Tell us, how did you get in here, and what kind of roles and responsibilities you have here?
Mm-hmm. So, like I mentioned previously, I was brought into Brooks Pierce by Elizabeth Beiser, who's the current secretary at the Department of Environmental Quality, and so I had a great experience working with Elizabeth and Chris McClure, who's now at the UNC system office, and had a great experience working with them for a few years. They left Brooks Pierce now, have gone on to their very impressive jobs. And so now I work on a team of 3. I work with Drew Moretz, who also just came from the UNC system office, and Ed Turlington, who's one of our partners at the firm. And we manage together about 30 clients. I specifically work on, I do a lot in conservation. I represent state parks, local parks, an organization called North Carolina Forever, and as well as some transportation clients, Sintra, some IT clients, the High Point Furniture Market. We have a lot of clients across a lot of different industries, and so a lot of what I do is just advocating for whatever their needs may be. That's the funnest part of lobbying. Not every day looks the same because we have so many clients with so many different needs. And specifically, a lot of what I do is appropriations work. And so basically trying to get appropriations for my clients stuck into the budget. So just working their agendas down at the General Assembly. I do some planning for some clients. And I had mentioned to you for this call, one of the things I'm working on currently is a board retreat and an upcoming event for North Carolina Forever. So my roles and responsibilities different depending on the day of the week it is, and the time of the year it is.
Cool. And what kind of policies do you enjoy working on?
So, like I said, a lot of what I do is operations based. I'm very passionate about conservation, so that's the kind of like my bread and butter of what I do. But in terms of what policies I enjoy working on, it really just depends. It changes depending on who I'm working with. We often work in coalitions with other lobbyists, so I'll have opportunities to work with friends of mine or people that I've never worked with before and get to strengthen those relationships. Sometimes we'll work on something so random and so weird that you would never even think that that's something that the state legislature would have an opinion on, but there we are working on it. And so it's kind of hard to answer that one just because, you know, my favorite policy might be one that I haven't even discovered yet.
It's pretty cool. With that, let's move on to the final segment of this conversation, wherein you can talk anything about either yourself, your organization, or what kind of advice would you give for someone who is getting into government relations?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to take the opportunity to talk more about the firm Brooks Pierce. We are a large law firm. We've got about 100 attorneys. We have offices in Greensboro, Raleigh, and Wilmington across so many industries that I couldn't even begin to describe them now. We've got great attorneys, some former secretaries, like I said, and some graduates that have gone on to be secretaries. And so one practice that we have that's kind of budding right now is the resiliency practice, which is kind of ties into a lot of the work that I've done with conservation. And then I think I also mentioned parks and North Carolina Forever. North Carolina Forever is a really cool, unique organization that brings together businesses and conservation organizations to advocate for land and water funding in our state. They advocate for the trust fund and as well as oysters, living shorelines, lots of fun stuff. And so that's a really great organization to work with because not only do they do good work in their advocacy, but they also are bringing together individuals who would never have a chance to maybe interact in the space that they do. Like, someone from Smithfield Foods and the Environmental Defense Fund coming together to talk about the importance of the trust fund is not a platform that we see a lot. And we have a board retreat coming up on the Outer Banks in a few weeks. So it just really gives our partners an opportunity to get to know each other on a personal level. So that's a really cool organization that I'm very excited about and excited to keep working with. So yeah.
Nice. With that, I'd like to conclude by saying, Katie, you are a fun and passionate individual to work with. Thanks so much for being on the show, and I wish you all the best for your future.
Great. Thank you, Deepak.